Well, Nebraska coaches met with the media today, and there was some breaking news that came out of it. We heard some rumblings late Tuesday night. In fact, right after the live show that Justin and I had, probably 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, I shot Justin a message and I said, oh shit, Markway is hurt, hearing it's his knee. And that was confirmed today by Coach Matt Rule. Markway did have his ACL surgery repair fail per Coach Rule. Not exactly sure what failing means, but he is going to be done likely for the rest of the season. This is Markway's third major knee injury in 4 seasons. And this is absolutely brutal for Markway. You have to feel for him. It's just awful. Now, the grand scheme of things, it's the next man up. What's next? That's what their motto is. Coach Holgorsen said the same thing. What's next? So who are those next men up? Well, we know about Luke Lindenmeyer. We know about Heinrich Herbert. We know about Carter Nelson, who's looking healthy, coming off his hip surgery from the offseason, which is really big now that he's come back healthy, considering we just lost Markway for the rest of the year. I'm going to give you one name I want you to watch out for. Eric Ingwerson, redshirt freshman from Papillion La Vista High School over in Papillion, Nebraska. He is someone that I personally am watching, a big physical tight end, similar in stature to Markway. He's a little bit bigger at 6'7", 255, 260 pounds, probably not as athletic as Markway, probably not running 21 miles an hour like Markway, but he is someone that has shown some promise between last year and in the spring. He had a couple big catches, if you recall, in the spring game, which again, spring game isn't something to get overly amped about, overly hyped about, but he made some nice catches, looked good, looked physical, looked more athletic than I thought. He was someone in his recruiting process Nebraska offered very late in that recruiting process. He was a guy that I personally figured in 2 or 3 years he was going to be converting to an offensive tackle. He'd be a really good physical, athletic offensive tackle, but he's done really good in his first year and a half or so at Nebraska at tight end. So going into his redshirt freshman season, he's someone I want you to watch for in the obvious situation now that we are without Markway for the remainder of the season. And then Coach Dana Holgorsen did talk about the running back room. This is one that should be no surprise to anybody on this channel. Makai Nelson is making his move. We've been talking him up for months now. And if you haven't done so yet, 2 weeks ago, Justin interviewed Makai's father, Rashawn Nelson, on our Husker Gutter call-in show. And it was about an hour-long interview. It was absolutely fantastic, going over great details about Makai as a kid, Makai as a player, Makai as a person. You need to check that interview out if you haven't done so yet, because it was a phenomenal interview. Now, Dana Holgorsen did praise Makai Nelson for all the work he's done in the offseason. He's not missing his assignment. He's developing very well. He's maturing, and he looks very explosive. Dana Holgorsen also talked about Isaiah Mosey as a running back. Said he's looking good right now, has that running back body. He's 6 foot, 200 to 210 pounds, was playing running back in the spring as well. So this was not a surprise move by anybody. And if I recall, I think Isaiah Mosey was the one who said, hey, can I try out running back? Because he just wants to get on the field, help this team win in any way he can. Dana Holgorsen talked about Connor Booth a little bit, and he said he's different compared to where he was in the spring. He was very pleased with the running back room as a whole and where it is now. Obviously, Quentin Ives is out with a hamstring injury, but he will be back in a couple of weeks. But if you recall our Tuesday episode, Huskers Live, Justin talked about how unique that injury is. We talked about how you can feel great, and then all of a sudden, boom, it pops, or you feel a pinch or something, and it's a very tedious injury where you have to kind of nurture yourself back to recovery. So a 2-week timeline that puts us right up to about a week and a half out from the season opener. It's July 31st. The season opener is in late August, so he may be back for the season opener. That's going to be something we want to monitor throughout the rest of fall camp. And then talking about offensive line, and in particular offensive tackle, Coach Holgorsen feels a lot better than they did in January. You have Teddy Prohaska back, who by all accounts Teddy Prohaska is recovered very well and playing at a very high level. I would still expect him to be a backup or a rotational piece at left or right tackle for Nebraska. And then you got Gunnar Gatula back as well. So that has developed depth, according to Dana Holgerson. They're rotating everybody in right now. And then, of course, Turner Corcoran kind of slowly working his way back from his injury. Turner's a guy that you can play literally all over the entire offensive line. He can play left tackle. He can play left guard, right tackle, even potentially center. I know they worked him out at center last year as an emergency reserve center, and that was prior to his injury, obviously. So all the ups and downs throughout Turner's career, he still has value on this offensive line because he can play all over the place. Now, hopefully he comes back healthy and he's ready to rock and roll going into his final year at Nebraska. And then Dana Holgerson did say they feel they have two really good groups at offensive line. And that goes 10 deep. There's 17 total offensive linemen. They feel really good about 10 of those offensive linemen. We've been saying this, and in particular, I've been saying this forever. This is the deepest Nebraska offensive line going back to the Bo Pelini era, and that's when they had a couple All-Americans, if I'm not mistaken. I know Spencer Long was an All-American. They had Yoshi Hardrick at tackle. They had a lot of good offensive linemen that went on to play professionally in Bo Pelini's time at Nebraska. Nebraska right now has a really good offensive line. Okay, you have 10 deep. That is an absolute win, I guess is a way to put it, for Nebraska. We've not been able to go 10 deep on an offensive line. Hell, we have not been able to go 7 or 8 deep on the offensive line for a very, very long time. So Coach Ryla has done a good job building depth, building his talent, developing his talent. I'm looking for a big step from this group going into the 2025 season. And then with the wide receiver room, probably the deepest position on the entire roster outside of maybe offensive line and linebacker. It's close. All three, wide receiver, line, and linebacker, are all very close in terms of the most depth. I love what we have in this wide receiver room. I thought it was kind of funny that Dana Holgerson, he was like, I don't want to mention any names. And then he went on and listed basically the top 7 wide receivers. Dane Key said he and Jacory are going to start, and they're looking good. He mentioned Isaiah Hunter, Quinn Clark, Keelan Smith, Jeremiah Jones, and Cortez Mills. That's probably your top group at wide receiver, with the exception of Janiron Bonner. He was kind of inadvertently left off, and I understand that. That's why coaches typically don't name names during press conferences, because they don't want to inadvertently leave someone like Janiron Bonner off, who is going to be in that rotation. But that is an 8-man rotation at wide receiver. That's impressive. Typically, you'll play 6, maybe 7 at the wide receiver position. Nebraska's 8 deep right now at wide receiver. Phenomenal position, a phenomenal problem to have for Dykeel Shorts. Now, speaking of Dykeel Shorts, said he'd never heard of Jeremiah Jones when he was at Kentucky. Didn't even know he existed as a player or a recruit, which is crazy because Jeremiah Jones is from Murray, Kentucky. So he said he was glad they're at Nebraska together. So that's more of probably a knock on Kentucky's scouting department for not knowing that there's this 6'4", 220-pound physical specimen right down the road from you. That was a consensus 4-star recruit. So glad he's at Nebraska. Glad Dykeel Shorts is at Nebraska. He mentioned that Jeremiah Jones is a freak of nature athlete. If you recall, when we did our top 5 incoming freshmen, Jeremiah Jones was my number 1. Because of everything he can do. He can play edge. He can play jack linebacker. He can play outside linebacker. He can play safety, rover. He can play wide receiver. He can play tight end. He can play almost anywhere on the football field. Nebraska's got him starting out at wide receiver. I think they're going to keep him there throughout the duration of his career. Big, physical receiver who can run long strides, strong hands. He's going to be someone to watch going into the season. Because he's a late arrival, I would not expect him to get a ton of snaps, maybe against Cincinnati, but those week 2, week 3 games against, Akron and Houston Christian, those are the games you want to watch for Jeremiah Jones, see what he can offer Nebraska long-term for the future. And then also with the wide receiver room, Dykeel Shorts said the room isn't where it wants to be right now, but they are getting there. He was asked about how they combat man coverage because it was a room that struggled mightily as we are well aware of, well documented, beating man coverage. And he said they're working on being more combative, whether that's with the wide receiver room or whether that's with the cornerbacks and the safeties, just being in those hand-to-hand combat situations on a consistent basis, getting the players, in this case wide receivers, uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what they're working on in spring. That's what they're going to be working on throughout fall camp and throughout the rest of the year. And then he did comment on Ja'Cory Barney, saying he has matured a lot mentally. In the spring, he was working on technique within the position, things like getting in and out of breaks, dropping your hips on routes, getting pad level correct, catching with extension, things like that. There were some growing pains for sure, but right now he's playing fast and he's continuing to develop. And Dana Holgorsen actually made a comment where last year, Ja'Cory would play fast, or he would run fast, but he would not play fast. And there is a difference between the two. And now he's not only running fast, but he's playing fast, according to wide receiver coach Da'Keil Short. So that's a big thing, being able to continue to develop a guy like Ja'Cory Barney, who's going to be an absolute threat in Dana Holgorsen's offense. And then he talked about run blocking. Is run blocking, and I said this before, and Justin will tell you the same thing, it's all about effort and want to. In point blank period, we did not see that last season from Nebraska's wide receiver room consistently until Dana Holgorsen arrived, where they were very bad, for lack of a better term, at run blocking. It's wanting to do it. It's just the will to do it, and being willing to run block and being physical, according to Da'Keil Shorts, can change the game for Nebraska. That's all I've got for today. Stay tuned. We have the Husker Gutter Call-In show tonight. I will not be in attendance. I am going to be at a going away party with some colleagues from work because we are getting ready to move down to Texas, as you all are aware. But call in tonight. Justin will be hosting tonight. If you have questions, whatever you got, a lot of Husker news to go through. Call in with your questions. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day, everybody.